Some revolutions are written with blood and some with ink. The Gadar movement was written with both. A major instance of history that has been forgotten.
There were no lessons or no chapters on Gadar movement when we studied in schools or colleges, so it is not being taught.
A subject that you have brought to light, not a lot of people know about this movement. During the initiation period of Gadar, the pen played a mightier role than the sword.
The kind of terror it caused in the heart of the British Empire was phenomenal.
A movement that was so large, it crossed borders. Not just the Indian border, but multiple borders around the world.
They were called Hindu slaves, and Indians and dogs are not allowed, was the common refrain.
Yes.
This created a feeling, a consciousness, which was earlier missing in them when they were living in India, that they were the citizens of a slave nation.
It is when people are under pressure, they will always find different window to jump out of.
The incident of Komagata Maru happened. A ship which was made to stop at Vancouver Harbour, and the people on board, they were not allowed to disembark. And then when the ship travels back, there is a shootout at the Bajbaj Ghat in Calcutta. This is the time to start a revolution. So the incident of Komagata Maru, it acted as a spur.
What was the connection between Bhagat Singh and Kartar Singh Saraba?
Bhagat Singh must have...
Hi everyone, I'm Ishdeep Korobroy and this is BTW, a place where we talk about everything from the food on your plate to the politics that shape the world. And by the way, stay connected because we are just getting started. Some revolutions are written with blood and some with ink. The Gadar movement was written with both. Welcome to BTW. In today's episode, we uncover a forgotten fire of India's freedom struggle, the Gadar movement. My guest today, Dr. Rana Preet Gill, is a veterinary doctor who is also an author of this book, a book that has been published by Penguin, and it is called The Gadar Movement. Hi Rana Preet ji, thank you so much for being a part of our podcast today. We are honored to have you on this podcast after this amazing book that you've written about a major instance of history that has been forgotten. Welcome on board.
Thank you so much, Ishdeep, for having me. It's my pleasure.
This is going to be the first episode of our podcast, and I believe it is important to have started it with something, something more substantial, something that was, a part of history that needed to come out. So it was really important that we started off with something like that. Rana Preet ji, before I even dive into what the book is about and what is the Gadar movement, I would first want to know everything about you. We know that you're a veterinary doctor. How from being a veterinary doctor did you come to start being a writer? What was that journey like?
So before being a writer, I have always been an avid reader. My father used to teach English in a college, and he always used to bring us a lot of storybooks. So born in the 80s, we used to have access to Russian literature books, Soviet literature books. And I remember I would read a lot along with my course books. So I think that reading part laid the foundation of my writing. So because before being a writer, you have to be a good reader. And writing before the novels definitely started with the newspapers. My first middle was published in The Tribune. I still remember the date, on 31st July 2017. So that year, along with Tribune, around 30 pieces got published in Hindustan Times and Daily Post along with the Tribune. And then next year I started sending pieces as a freelance writer to all the national newspapers like the Hindu, Deccan Herald, the Hitvad, which is a Nagpur-based publication, the New Indian Express, all the newspapers which were accepting freelance writers, freelance pieces. So I got published almost everywhere. The Statesman also, a couple of short stories. And then I published a couple of novels, compiled my middles into a book. And I think because I just wanted to write and had so much to say, and eventually this book happened. So yeah, this is my writing journey.
That's amazing.
From newspapers to books.
To books. Actually, from reading and then to newspapers and then to books, this has been a whole process. I remember a little instance from my childhood. जब मैं छोटी होती थी तो I would cry to my mother about bringing me new toys and everything. और हर बार she would say नहीं लेना. But, after a point of time when I could start reading, that was probably when I was in, upper KG or something. So I would start asking her for books. and she never refused. She would say, "Ki, "ठीक है, you can buy a book," but then she would work on my vocabulary with it and all of that. So I agree, it is very important that everybody starts reading, not just to write, but also to learn so much more about life.
Exactly.
When you mentioned about reading Russian literature, do you have any favorite book or any author that you really liked from?
I don't remember the authors or the names of books from that era, but I remember a lot of characters, which have been like imprinted in my mind. The princess used to be named Princess Maria. The
Okay.
prince used to be named Prince Ivan. And there always used to be an evil witch, Baba Yaga, who used to sit on the broom and harass both the prince and princess. Vasilisa. So these are the couple of names, characters from the storybooks which I remember. I don't remember actually any particular book.
Right. As a doctor, while you were working as a doctor, that's when you have written the book. You did not drop your profession or anything. You were still working as one. My question being, how could you even bring out the time, from a job that is demanding? Even if, you're working at a government hospital, it gets even more demanding there. How do you sort of balance your time between your profession and this entire time that you've given to writing?
I think when you're really passionate about something, you always find time for that, particular thing. So my routine for writing has always been to wake up early.
Right.
Waking up early as 3 and writing till 6. So that was the only time when the entire household used to be really quiet and I could, work at my pace without bothering about the noise and other things. And also about having that kind of guilt in the back of my mind that I'm not being true to my profession or not being there for my family. So yeah, writing time has always been early morning when there were no demands on me, nothing to do except to sit and write.
Yeah.
And then definitely I would also like to thank my department because there has been that constant support and encouragement from the seniors and the colleagues who have been very happy with my success. So I think that is also a very positive point, that when you are supported by the organization for which you work.
That is something that does not really happen with a lot of professionals around our country as well.
Yeah.
But the fact that you get such support is commendable. It's also very great on the part of the department to, give you some time for this as well. It is a very important subject that you have brought to light after a very long time, actually. Not a lot of people know about this movement. It was a part of history that had been long forgotten, and to bring it back to light like this is it's cheerful. It's apparently something to be cheered on. Kudos to that. Janapreet ji, आपको कब लगा कि मतलब अब मुझे गदर मूवमेंट के बारे में लिखना है? इतने सारे आपने, you've published multiple middles in the newspapers, you've also published different novellas and novels, but why and when did you feel like कि this is the topic that you need to research and then you need to write about this?
I think I brought back the inspiration from cellular jail, where we visited. I, along with my husband and daughter, we went there back in December 2019, before COVID. So before going, I had just updated my status on Facebook. And one of my seniors, Dr. Ranjeev Bali, he had replied that in the park facing the cellular jail was a statue of his grandfather's brother. So he was a revolutionary who was imprisoned in Mandalay conspiracy. His name was Pandit Ram Rakhabali. So when we went to cellular jail and we went to the park and I saw the statue of Pandit Ram Rakhabali, I was really intrigued and really surprised that he was a revolutionary from Hoshiarpur. So his statue was next to Veer Savarkar's statue. So my first thought on seeing that statue was that everybody knows about Veer Savarkar. He's such a tall figure. So, but no one knows about Pandit Ram Rakhabali. So when I came back, so I started asking questions, started meeting family members of that particular senior. All they knew was that he was, like I already mentioned, imprisoned in Mandalay conspiracy. And then when I started reading about it and I started talking about it and making calls about it, I came to know about Gadar movement. Basically, Mandalay conspiracy was part of Gadar movement. So I was brought up in Nakodar. So I had studied in Nakodar, and in Jalandhar, Deshbhagat Yadgar Hall had been built by Gadarites, after independence, I think sometime in 1957. So it houses a very good library which has a lot of Gadar literature. and Nakodar is just like half an hour from Jalandhar, and I have been frequenting Deshbhagat Yadgar Hall for some expos, to buy suits and all. So I was like really surprised that with such proximity and living in Punjab, born and brought up in Punjab, I did not know anything about Gadar movement. Then I realized there were no lessons or no chapters on Gadar movement when we studied in schools or colleges, so it is not being taught. I was pretty sure that not many people knew about Gadar movement, so that gave me a spark. So I thought, let me write about Gadar movement. And when I started to look about around for books on Gadar movement, they were either very written by academicians, written in that kind of way, which were not accessible to a common reader. So that kind of sparked my mind, and that gave me me the encouragement that okay, then that was the moment. Then I thought that okay, I'm going to write about Gadar movement.
So majorly the idea behind bringing about this topic as a book, as a novel, was to help the general gentry connect with the entire movement.
Exactly. So the point was to start a dialogue,
Yes.
point was to start a dialogue, to write about it, so that this movement again comes into consciousness of common man.
Correct.
So, and those people, a lot of people know about it definitely, but let those know about it who does not know anything about the movement.
Yeah. And it's almost astonishing that how a movement that was so large, when I say large, I mean that it crossed borders, not just the Indian border, but multiple borders around the world, and brought together people in transnational solidarity towards a movement. They were trying to put up a united front for a cause. And that is something that needed to be taught in schools, and I'm almost sad over the fact that we had never been told about this.
So I think the reason could be that this movement came way before independence. My book covers a span of 1913 to 1918, and that was the time when Gadar movement was its peak, and then it's just extinguished. The people who were by 1918, most of the Gadarites, they were either executed or they were transported to cell or jail. I think that could be one reason, that because it came way before independence, and when this movement, happened, and also because it took place in foreign countries, and when those people they came to India, the Indian populace was not politically conscious. Maybe that could be one of the reasons. And also there is a misconception that this is a purely Sikh movement, because a lot of Gadarites were Punjabi peasants, but obviously this is a misnomer, because Gadar movement was a very collaborative effort.
Correct.
By people from different regions and religions.
Right. That is something that you clearly mentioned in the book.
So I think these could be the reasons why this movement, just faded into oblivion.
When you initially were telling how you got inspired to write this book, you mentioned the jail, cellular jail, right? Where in India is that? It's
in Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Right.
It was basically made for people, for revolutionaries, so they could be transferred away from the mainland,
segregated in a way.
Yeah, so kind of segregated in a way, because the British government, they were afraid that if these people, they were imprisoned in local jails, these people will do something, ignite a spark of revolution, try to reach out to the local populace. So the plan was to keep them away from people, to keep them away. So kind of a punitive kind of measure. So that was why it was built far away in Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
I like how Britishers were aware that these people had the power to inflict, a certain revolution or a rebellion among people, even if they were in the jail. That is why they were so scared that they kind of literally pushed them away from the mainland altogether.
Yes, exactly.
I really love how you've started the book. So on the first page of the book, when you start reading it, even before you start reading it actually, you started with a quote from the Zafarnama. Zafarnama being a letter that Shri Guru Gobind Singh Ji had written to Aurangzeb because of the atrocities that he had been inflicting on his people back in that time. What inspired you to pick up this quote to start over the book?
So when I read this quote, it kind of wove itself with the spirit of the Gadar, because the Gadarites also took up the arms as a last measure of that was their last resort,
right,
to fight the Britishers. So you want
Please,
me to read
we would love it if you could read the quote from the book.
So I think that was it just felt so right for this book, When all has been tried, yet justice is not in sight, it is then right to pick up the sword, it is then right to fight. So for Gadarites, which was basically an armed rebellion, this was the last resort, to fight for their rights. So they thought that to free their motherland, to fight for its freedom was their right. It kind of aligned itself with this book. Yeah.
Yes, I do agree with you. The reason behind asking this question is so the audiences understand as well. It does definitely align very perfectly with the entire story of the Gadar movement. And understanding that, before I even dive into the main story of the Gadar movement, maybe we start off with understanding a little bit about the main figures of who, started with this. How did it initially start to how did it start gaining that sort of substance in the in the during the entire independence. So, can we start with a few key figures such as Kartar Singh Saraba, Sohan Singh Bakhna, and Hardyal Singh? Can we start off with Sohan Singh Bakhna, maybe?
So Sohan Singh Pakna ji was born in Amritsar. He was brought up by his mother and his stepmother. So whatever I have like read about him, so he was a rich landlord, but he fell into bad company. He lost all his money, and then eventually he went to United States to earn money.
Right.
So there, because he became such an authoritative figure that he had the support and confidence of all the Punjabi populace.
Yes.
So he kind of became their leader.
Right.
So Lala Hardyal was basically a prodigy. So he was a very he was the son of a government employee from Delhi. He studied in St. Stephen's College, and then he went to Lahore, and he was such a brilliant chap that the British government uh, had instituted a scholarship for meritorious students, and Hardyal was the first North Indian to win that scholarship, and eventually he went to England. But after he went there, he aligned himself with Shamaji Krishna Varma, who was an exiled revolutionary, along with Savarkar.
Right.
He came in touch with them, with their society. They had formed
In the Indian house.
yeah,
in England.
they had formed their house was called the Indian house, and they had formed a society there. And something happened, and he gave up the scholarship, and he became part of the revolutionary activities in Europe.
Right.
So in Europe, he acquired that kind of knowledge, how to run a party, because Savarkar and Shamaji Krishna Varma, when they were back in India, they were already, particularly Savarkar, they were already active in the, movement. So from there, Hardyal is called to Astoria, United States, where he forms this party, the Gadar Party. And then Kartar Singh Saraba, he is a student. He born in Ludhiana, and then he went for education to Cuttack, and then to University of Berkeley to study chemistry.
Oh, wow.
A very promising student. At the age of 16, he goes to United States, and when he comes in touch with all these people again, he gets change. That change of heart happens, and he too becomes a part of the Gadar Party.
Right. Initially, in the initial chapters of your book, what I had read, this starts with how you start with a region in Punjab where these people are like going through the troubles of how the British are allowing them to somehow own their own lands, but still, the prices are so high that these people have to sell their lands to be able to survive. So it is like, let's say, a false idea of freedom that is given to them, but it's not really that way. And then slowly these people start understanding that army is a better way to pay them. So they start joining the army, and through the army they go and explore the whole world, because there goes the Britishers trying to conquer the entire world. And then after that, once they have seen and explored all around, they come back, and now they still want to go to the faraway shores and cross the borders as such, which they do. And they take a longer route through it. Now, when I'm talking about the route, from what I understood through your book was that initially they would have to go to Hong Kong, and from there they would have to, earn a little bit, and then board a ship to Canada or maybe the United States. My question being, I want you to help the audiences understand, as well as me, that how this entire transnational community was created throughout, that from India it went through to Hong Kong, and then I think in Hong Kong also there was somebody who was who had established a certain place for these Indian boarders to come in. And he had opened his house for a lot of Indian people. And then from there, these people, and from how did the rebellion start crossing borders like that?
So initially, how I have categorized in my book, I will just go that way. So the Punjabi peasants, they started going abroad because the land holdings were very less,
Right.
and the taxes were high. And along with that, the plagues, they just, caused a lot of mortality.
Yes.
And in a way, it was a way of survival for them. The families were like, okay, let one son go abroad. At least if the plague inflicts again, at least he will be safe. Our family name will go on. So there were multiple reasons why these people started going abroad, apart from definitely to earn money.
Yes.
The education system in India, they were not encouraging a good education system in India. They did not want people to be educated. But on the contrary, if the students, they were definitely encouraging the meritorious students. They were allowed to go abroad.
Right.
So like people like Kartar Singh Saraba, Daris Chenchia, they went outside, they joined University of Berkeley for studies. And then there were the exiled revolutionaries, people who were not allowed to do any kind of anti-British thing in India. They moved to Europe first, and then to America, because America at that time, before the First World War, was not like aligned with the British. So a lot of lot of revolutionary activities, anti-British activities were going on their soil, not only by Indians, but by people from other global regions, the Chinese, the Irish people. So all kind of revolutionary, it was a fertile ground for revolutionaries, America of those times.
Yes.
What happened there, that Lala Hardyal was the one person who brought all these people together, the peasants, the students, and the exiled revolutionaries. Now look at the dichotomy of this thing, that the anti-British activities were going on in England at that time,
Yes.
in the country which was governed by the British, while it was not going on in India. So all these factions are joined, and they get support, kind of a global support. So Irish people were also struggling for their freedom. So they were publishing this newspaper called Gaelic American. So the Gadar newspaper, which was launched by the Gadar party, it used to travel in the folds of that newspaper.
Right.
This newspaper often used to carry articles of Savarkar and other revolutionaries, which were translated into their language. So like this, they got global support.
Yes.
While coming back, because Singapore was a halt, and then Hong Kong was the point where the ships used to travel from Canada to Hong Kong to Calcutta. So wherever these people were going, they made gurdwaras, and those gurdwaras again became a meeting point. Definitely, wherever they made gurdwaras, there was kind of a spread of revolution. And apart from that, the Gadar newspaper.
Right.
The Gadar newspaper, which was launched by the Gadar party, it traveled throughout the world, to faraway corners of the world. And this word of paper, this word on papers, it spread throughout the country. So this was also a big, revolutionizing point.
I remember also back in India, while initially all of this was happening, back in India, was it Veer Savarkar's brother who was imprisoned for writing probably middles and articles against the British in the newspapers? Or whose brother was it who was...
So his brother was definitely... he was imprisoned because of some pistols which were sent by Savarkar.
Yes,
Yeah.
while the pistols were sent by Savarkar, but I think the judge incriminated him
Yeah.
for the book that he had written or some article that he had got.
That was the contentious book written by Veer Savarkar, which was also published in the Gadar newspaper.
Now, when we talk about the entire movement and how it was going through the borders, how did Hardyal Singh play a major role in it? Because he is one of the major figures who had started the Gadar movement, as we read also in the book. There's one whole chapter dedicated to him. How was he imperative to this entire movement?
So Lala Hardyal, he became instrumental, he became instrumental in starting the Gadar party. So he was able to, the Punjabi community was deeply distrustful of babus and other educated elite, because one or twice it happened that people came to the gurdwaras and they said, we are going to wage a revolution, and they collected funds and just those funds were siphoned off. So, but Hardyal was one person who was able to, make a connect with them.
Right.
So Hardyal was instrumental in a way that he brought all the factions together, and he knew how to run a revolutionary party, because he was already part of one part. He was already he was groomed by Savarkar. When in England, he had been attending meetings at the India House, so he was kind of groomed by Veer Savarkar. And also he was writing for newspaper while he was in England. So he had some experience of running a newspaper as well. So his expertise came into the fore when he combined all these factions. So after a while, Hardyal has to leave. He is not part of the Gadar party anymore, but the party still thrives. So yeah, in a way, he was instrumental. But after he leaves for Switzerland, because the British government, when they started publishing the Gadar newspaper, they become wary of that. They had moles. There is one person called Hopkinson who was keeping a watch on the activities of the Gadarites in Canada and America, and he's relaying all the information to the Indian government. So he's kind of drawing salary from the Indian government, Canadian government, and the US government. So he's relaying, yeah. So he's an Anglo-Indian. So he knows Hindi, he knows Punjabi and English as well. Right. So he's there with them all the time, and he has inducted some moles, some Punjabi people who are there in the gurdwaras, and they're listening to all the conversation and relaying it back. The Gadar paper caused quite a stir, and the British, they are very wary of these newspapers, and they already know all the activities which are going on there.
Before we move forward, I would really like to ask you, is it safe to say that during the initiation period of Gadar, the pen played a mightier role than the sword?
Yeah, definitely, because the Gadar newspaper was such an amazing thing that happened, that wherever it traveled, to faraway lands, not only in Canada, America, to small countries, Panama, into Hong Kong, in China, Malay, wherever. So people had started organizing little Gadar groups of their own, which had no allegiance to the main Gadar party. So in a way, because the kind of terror it caused in the heart of the British Empire was phenomenal. They banned the newspaper, and despite the banning of the newspaper, the Gadarites, they involved innovative ways. They told people, okay, if you're writing personal letters, just write some part of the Gadar newspaper, copy it on the personal letters, so let people know about this, that what we are writing. So that was that became their modus operandi. Writing personal letters and writing little bit of snippets of the Gadar newspaper.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, definitely, it played a very pivotal role in the spread of the movement outside the North American continent.
That's a very creative way of propagating a very creatively set up revolution. And that is amazing. It is when people are under pressure, they will always find a different window to jump out of.
Yeah.
So it is like that. Coming back to the Mandalay conspiracy that you had mentioned earlier on, what was the Mandalay conspiracy and how did it come forward?
So initial plan of the Gadarites was to launch strikes on the armories, on the cantonments, because they had been in touch with the armies there in Firozpur, in Naushera, at other places, in Amritsar. So the plan was that the army people are going to side with the Gadarites. They are going to give them access to the arms, and they are going to bring a revolution, which was a very, to them, this was a sure shot kind of plan which would work.
A practical way.
Yeah, it was, but this did not happen practically, because the British already knew what they were going to do, and their plans were foiled. So after that, before 1947, during those years, Burma is a part of the Indian peninsula. Yeah. So then they planned a move from Burma to India, So what they do is they started forming groups in Burma. So they thought we can cross the border through Assam and come and strike up a revolution. So they started forming little groups in that part of in Burma, But again, that was basically the Mandalay conspiracy. But again, that was foiled by the British. But because again, everything just came out in the open.
Yeah, it was all
Yeah,
leaked.
so it was their plan to come from Burma and to move through Assam to the border and like wage a revolution.
Right. And then get access to the armories and okay, start the rebellion there. Correct. Apparently, we do understand that Lalaji played a very imperative role, even for whatever time period it was. So now, once we see the entire Gadar movement is moving to Canada here, let's say, now what is happening in Canada? How did people come together there, and how did this, affect the revolution back in India?
So initially, Canada at that time was the dominion of the British government.
Right.
I mean, there was self rule. So when these peasants moved to Canada, they faced racism and racialism, because of many reasons. First of all, these Punjabi peasants, they are not educated. They do not know how to read, write, or speak in English. They were not able to communicate with people, with their bosses, with whom they were working. So a kind of distance was always maintained. Secondly, because they are not educated, they did not have that kind of finesse. These people, they used to speak loudly, they used to spit in public, they used to stare at the women, because they were just so star-struck when they saw that the women of that country, the kind of freedom they had, the children, they were so healthy, they were so plump.
I think it still happens.
Yeah, and then they used to compare the women and their children back home.
Right.
So that kind of comparison they used to make, but they were not aware that these kind of things were like annoying the people there, to stare at them, or talk loudly, and then they had this habit of speaking lies over trivial matters, and then definitely their appearance, because they had this huge pagadi and large, long, flowing beards.
Right.
So I think these were the reasons, and then definitely. Because these people who started working in the lumber mills there, they used to work, because Punjabis by nature are very hardworking lot, and they used to work hard more than their the designated time, than their counterparts, Canadian and American counterparts. They used to work a lot. They never used to ask for money for the extra labor, or for the extra effort, for the extra hours they were putting in, and they thought that it is fine. So these kinds of things also created a resentment, the Canadian and American labor, because the people were like happy with the Punjabis, because they were paying them less and making them work more. And this was, leading to loss of jobs. So these were some of the reasons that these people, they needed support. So they started clubbing together. And as I've already said, they started forming gurdwaras and associations amongst themselves. And then most of the community was so tightly knit that they were supporting their own people, because back in 1904 to 1906, Canada was undergoing a recession. So Punjabis helped Punjabis, they formed a tight knit community. And then when they started talking among themselves, then they used to discuss, okay, they were called Hindu slaves, and Indians and dogs are not allowed, was the common refrain. So these kind of things kind of created an antipathy in their minds, because they thought that if they're going to travel to Canada, the Queen is, in charge of both the countries. And she has said in one of her messages that you are free to travel to any country. But now such kind of discrimination, is being met to them. Yeah. And this created a feeling, a consciousness, which was earlier missing in them when they were living in India, that they were the citizens of a slave nation. So this was the start for them. So these people, and then revolutionaries, they are definitely an enlightened lot. They know more than them, and the students also. But for Punjabi peasants, this racism became the first reason for this collaborative effort, this kind of consciousness,
and which is why they were able to. So the revolution that they started in Canada, how did that have an impact back in India?
So Lala Hardyal knew the might of the British. He knew that the time is not ripe for a revolution there, because people were very happy with the British Raj. They used to call it Mai Baap Ki Sarkar. But then the incident of Komagata Maru happened. A ship which was made to stop at Vancouver Harbour, and the people on board, they were not allowed to disembark, and they were kept there without food, water and medicines. And then when the ship travels back, there is a shootout at the Bajbaj Ghat in Calcutta, and a lot of people die. So this incident the unfaithful, I mean, like the fateful incident of Komagata Maru, this incident acts as a spark. And these people, they start coming back, though they were not ready. The time was not ready and they were not prepared also, But they just act in anger and haste that we have to come back and now that this is the time to start a revolution. So the incident of Komagata Maru, it acted as a spur for the revolution to come back. Otherwise, it might have taken years.
Yes.
For them to actually plan it more properly,
Right. Oh, but this was majorly because they wanted to avenge the ordeal that
exactly.
Noons had faced, right? Uh, Also, I had a question from back in the time where we were talking about Veer Savarkar and how he had started the India House, which was a boarding house for the Indian students who were coming to England to get educated. He had also run away from England and moved to Paris in the middle.
Yeah.
And I mean, why did he do that? And then he also came back to England knowing that he is under surveillance somehow. He would be caught the moment he, sets foot on the English soil. And he still made his way back. Do you want to give me any ideas about it?
I cannot tell you more than about this. Apart that Savarkar was, part of revolutionary activities in India also, and he was such a daredevil, and he continued them abroad also. So I cannot throw more light on this.
I mean, there's nothing that is documented as to the reason why he would have ever planned to get back to.
So because no, there might have been reasons, but I have not studied them in detail because Savarkar was, he was not actually part of the Gadar movement, but he was then in a way part because he influenced Lala Hardyal and he was at that time. So because the study was about Gadar movement,
Yes,
so I did not study
read
Savarkar's exploits and revolutions in
as
detail.
much because that would be a whole different book altogether.
Yeah, because so much already has been written about him. There are so many books available about him.
Now coming to Kartar Singh Saraba, we've had a word about Veer Savarkar and then Lalaji, and now talking about Kartar Singh Saraba, how did he play an imperative role in this entire movement, and what was his trajectory throughout the whole rebellion?
So Kartar Singh Saraba, he was raised by his grandfather because his parents unfortunately I think die in an accident. So raised by his grandfather, he does his preliminary education from Saraba village in Ludhiana, and then he's sent to Cuttack, where his uncles are in government jobs. So at that time, the divide of the West Bengal state happens, and Saraba is deeply moved by it. And during those times, he's sent to University of Berkeley to study. And again, when he reaches that country, again he is, he's being thoroughly frisked, and then he realizes that it is being done because he is an Indian.
Oh.
And then he comes in contact with Jwala Singh Thatia. So Jwala Singh Thatia is a potato farmer in United States who runs a scholarship scheme for Indian students, meritorious Indian students. So Jwala Singh Thatia gets him in touch with other people, Lala Hardyal and others. So Kartar Singh Saraba plays a very pivotal role. I think because of his youth and because of the kind of energy he brings to the whole movement. And because he's only 16, he starts participating in the Gadar activities, and especially in the Gadar newspaper, he writes a lot of anonymous poems in Gadar Diya Gunja. And then he starts living at Yugantar Ashram, which is the premises of the Gadar party in San Francisco. And he's the one who is, because there is no photocopy machine, he's the one who is writing the Gadar newspaper by hand, and then there is a litho machine, which is a kind of a thing to replicate the papers, not as efficient as a photocopier. And then when he comes back also, he's the one who does not choose to land at Calcutta port because people are being arrested there by the government, and Sohan Singh Pakna is the first one. He chose to come through Madras, and then he's also instrumental in regrouping the Gadar party when most of the people have been arrested. So after the regrouping of the Gadar party, I'll just narrate an interesting part that he changes his base, his appearance so many times. There are times just fools the police people.
Oh, he disguises himself.
Yeah,
every
he
time.
disguises himself.
That's
so
very
one
smart.
time they were searching for Saraba, and Saraba is just standing next to the policeman, and he asks him, "Have you seen this guy?" And he's like, "No, I have not seen him. I have not seen anyone here." And then he paddles away. And later on, the policeman recalls, okay, this was the person with whom I was talking. He was Kartar Singh Saraba. So with his youth and energy, I mean, he used to cycle the villages, spreading the word of Gadar.
Yeah.
Definitely, there is one more incident, and when they start committing dacoities because they need money to support the movement, one of his, companions, he tries to, not exactly molest, but he tries to misbehaves with a girl.
Okay.
Where they are committing a dacoity, and Saraba instantly, slaps him, or just pushes him away and telling him that no, this is not the way to behave with a woman. So this tells us a lot about his integrity.
Yes.
Such a youthful man with such values, so young. So Saraba was there throughout the movement and joined Gadar party at 16 and executed at 19.
I mean, at 16, we could not even have bothered to know about all this. But of course, we are in a different age and a different generation altogether. But, that also reminds me that he's been a great, how do I say, a youth icon for Bhagat Singh as well. Do you want to shed some light on that? What was the connection between Bhagat Singh and Kartar Singh Saraba? And why did he look up to him in such light?
Bhagat Singh's Chachaji Ajit Singh was also a little bit part of Gadar, not exactly part of Gadar movement, but Ajit Singh during those times had collaborated with Lala Lajpat Rai, and he had formed a Bharat Mata society there. He also started a Pagdi Sambhal Jata movement.
Yes.
So the young Kartar Singh Saraba used to frequent Bhagat Singh's home to meet his chacha Ajit Singh, and obviously Bhagat Singh must have seen young Kartar Singh Saraba, had those interactions. They must have played in his mind, or and then he started keeping a photo of Kartar Singh Saraba always in his pocket. So Bhagat Singh always has a photo. So I think because Saraba was young and he had been part of those interactions, I think he must have been influenced by Saraba in a lot of ways.
Right.
And then Bhagat Singh was only 23 when he was executed.
Also, I wanted to ask, we've talked so much about Kartar Singh Saraba, and this boy was executed. I wouldn't even go on to call him a man because he starts off at 16 and then he's executed by 19. Can you, maybe detail out or maybe narrate a little bit of the incident of his execution as to how it took place and what really went on, if you're...
So what I have read in the books, there is this one incident that when Saraba is presented before the judge gives him an option that if you opt for clemency, say sorry and say that you have not done all this, whatever you have done, we are not going to execute you. But Saraba is such a bravado, such a brave person. He tells him, no, I did what I did and I'm not going to say sorry for this. And then he is given death sentence along with Vishnu Ganesh Pingle and many others.
That does explain a lot about his staunch demeanor.
His courage,
yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think these figures did play a very major role in the independence of India, though it was more than a few years before the independence really took place. You are right somehow, which is why it wasn't really taught to us or wasn't really talked about as much. Coming to Sohan Singh Bakhna, right? Can we start talking a little bit about him now? Would you go on to relate some incidents from his time or his, his time with the people of the movement or his time throughout the rebellion? How did he get through into it and what happened with him?
Unfortunately, Sohan Singh Bakhna was amongst the first lot who was arrested by the British government when he landed at Bajbaj Ghat. So his role in the movement, is curtailed there. So after he is sentenced to Andaman and Nicobar Islands, there are many instances where he stands up for the rights, for the just rights of the prisoners. And later on also he was part of many revolutionary activities, but his part in Gadar movement is only when he is there in Canada and America, because he is kind of seen as a leader by the Punjabi peasants. And later on he becomes part of many other movements, but But after his arrest, his part of Gadar movement, yeah, it
It
stops
stops
there.
there.
Yeah.
Right. Rana Preeti, we have covered a lot about the Gadar movement by now and some of the major figures of the movement as well. I do have a certain question where I would like to ask you about the few various incidents that happened throughout the movement that made you feel like, how could this even be? How is this even possible? Or why would anybody want to do this to anyone else? Or anything that stirred up a very strong emotion in you. So we would like to know about these incidents throughout the movement.
Definitely the way Gadarites, especially Kartar Singh Sarabha and others, were, given executions and imprisonments without a just trial. They just landed and they are the sentences are passed without even letting them meet their family members. So that felt very unjust. And then the kind of time, the harrowing time the Gadarites had in Andaman and cellular jail at Andaman and Nicobar Islands, that was very, very painful to read. The way they were treated there, even the prisoners from other conspiracies are also there. The kind of torture that was inflicted on them, that was very painful. It was very painful to read, actually.
Okay, so when you talk about the torture that was inflicted on them, has that been mentioned in any kind of Gadar literature? And if it has, then would you put some light on that as well?
Yeah, definitely. They were not given proper food. They were given punishments. They were beaten. They were made to stand for a long time. They were put in very small cages where they're not able to stand up or lie down. Kind of solitary imprisonment. They are not allowed to talk to one another. Yeah, that is the kind of punishment. So the jailer David Barry devises unique punishments, to prisoners, to trouble them, to torture them, not even trouble them, to break their spirit physically and mentally in both ways.
Okay, I don't even have the words to explain how this entire ordeal would have been for them. You went to the Andaman Islands and you went to the jail as well. Did you see through the jail and were you able to visit a few spots where these prisoners might have been kept?
So yeah, the jail had many wings. Some have been demolished, and a few are still standing. And you could actually see the small cells where the Gadarites and the other revolutionaries were imprisoned. Yeah, definitely that makes you think about those times and the kind of feelings these people must have, the kind of times these people had been through, in such a it was a punitive measure. It was basically, the jail was meant for punishing
Those people.
yeah. So yeah, it was really heartbreaking to
Right.
go and see there. And they have this show as well at night, where they tell people about the ordeals these revolutionaries went through.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
light and sound show
In the prison
cellular
itself.
jail. Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice. At least somebody is shedding some light on that entire incident. Okay, now that we've covered up so much about the Gadar movement, I believe people should already feel encouraged to read the book and know about this very massively important part of history that has been missed out on for a lot of years now. But would you want to, we would actually appreciate if you do this, that read a little passage or a poem from the book that you really like or something that touches your heart, anything.
So this chapter 38, the Gadar movement, wins and losses. This is my favorite chapter. They did not care about it. So there is the Gadarites. The Gadarites did not care about a good life and money, for which they initially came to Canada and America. They did not go there to start a revolution that would take away everything. They came to make a better life for themselves and their loved ones. The cost of this life was separation from wives who would wait for an eternity, watching the door for shadows unformed. There were children left behind who would wait for their fathers to carry them on their shoulders, who would wake up every morning without knowing life, with the protection of a father, and slept every night with uncertainties looming large in their minds about the existence of one. Then there were children who were born when their fathers were away. They encountered them through the fragmented memories recounted by their mothers. The families of Gadarites bore the brunt of loss multiple times. Firstly, when the man left. Secondly, when they came back but did not want to be tied to their homes anymore. And thirdly, when they eventually sacrificed their physical form. I really loved.
It's very nice. That was very beautifully read. Can you also shed some light on the secular credentials of this movement? Because as we understand, like you mentioned before, that this movement is not just restricted to Punjab, it has been all over India and then throughout the world, right? A very globalized movement at that. So, can we know about how other people from different regions of India were involved in this movement?
So, Gadar movement is not purely a Sikh movement. It was never purely a Sikh movement. That's a misconception. So, definitely, a lot of the people who participated in Gadar movement were Sikh Punjabi peasants, but there were people from other regions and other religions. So, Kanshi Ram, who was the treasurer of the Gadar party, he was a Hindu. Lala Hardyal was a Hindu. Then Mohammad Barkatullah Bhopali, who played a crucial role in the Gadar movement and also used to bring out a lot of papers when he was in Japan. He was a Muslim along with Rahmat Ali. He was also part of the Gadar movement. He was a Muslim. Then Rash Behari Bose, he was a Bengali and he also led the Gadar movement at one point of time. Shachindranath Sanyal was from Lucknow, from central UP. So, Daris Chenchia was from Andhra Pradesh. Vishnu Ganesh Pingle was from Maharashtra. So they were people from different regions and different religions. So Gadar party, in a way, was amalgamation of different regions and religions. So, so in a way, it was a nationalist movement. In a way, it was a nationalist movement.
Started off as a nationalist movement, I must say, and then went international as such.
Yeah.
Also inciting sort of sympathy among the other, people from different other countries, people of different cultural or traditional backgrounds. Even they did start understanding the graveness of this entire movement, I believe, after a point of time. With that, is there any powerful message that you would like to share with the audience, or something after having done so much research on this, anything related to the movement that you would want to share with the audience?
So, like, yeah, there was one thing we were earlier discussing, the impact of the non-resident Indians on the Indian communities. I would kind of a message and a plea, because this is not related with Gadar movement. Those were different when there was the need for the armed rebellion. Now, definitely, because we are living in an independent country, there is no need for an armed insurrection. Now there is need for the people who have gone out. They need to bring something back positive. Now, with a lot of devastation, with floods, where a lot of help is required, I'm pretty sure people are already doing this also. But the people who are non-resident Indians, who are residing in Canada and United States, they must come back and do something for the people, for this so much of devastation. They must do something for the people in their villages. And otherwise also, these people are already doing it, but they should always come back and do something for the schools, for the infrastructures, for the medical health. Something, in a way, they can just chip in. So I think at that time, the Gadar movement, the immigrants showed us the way, and now also is the time that they should show us their support. Yes. And help their people, in any way they can do.
I think that is absolutely correct. And it would be it would be like giving back to the land that's brought you up.
Exactly. Yes.
And I believe it is very important that we do that. The stories of Punjab need to be told, and Punjab needs support at this point of time. We need people to pull us back up after the floods that we have faced, after the atrocities that people have been through, after the natural disasters that we have witnessed. It is imperative that we stand back up again and we survive through this. With that, thank you so much, Rana Preet ji. And I must say, I have a little sentence that I had thought of before I would end this entire conversation, is that history is not something that has happened. It is something that we choose to remember. And Gadar movement is one such movement that needs to be remembered no matter. It is important. And again, me, along with all the people who will know about the movement now, I must say we are all grateful to you for bringing about this beautiful piece of work, something that has helped us all know about something so important. I keep telling, I keep saying this throughout the podcast, that this is a very important, very imperative moment. It is because that history like this needs to be documented in the right ways, and it needs to reach out to the masses majorly. So thank you so much once again, Rana Priji.
Thank you.
I think we had a very beautiful conversation.
Yeah,
Looking forward
indeed.
to many more.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Ishdeep.